Inner child healing and a spiritual awakening almost amount to the same result in wholeness. Both processes are going to bring us back into a place of being whole again. When you go through a spiritual awakening, one of the things that happens is a breakdown of everything familiar, starting with your family, starting with your best friends, relationships. Everything starts to crumble. The structures begin to break down and crumble because our awakening brings in a new frequency, a new vibration. That means that if we're not of the same vibration or the frequency, we cannot occupy for a long period of time the same space, right? So when your vibration shifts, if you're living with someone, you'll find that suddenly either they will start spending less time in the house or you, but you will not be able to coexist because of that shift in vibration and frequency. The first relationship that breaks down for most is our parents, our mother, our father. The main reason why this, and it is not the case for everyone because one can have a spiritual awakening without this, but this post is particularly for some of us who've had a spiritual awakening but also had inner child issues, particularly to do with caregivers who were their parents. Our parents are chosen by us. We choose to be incarnate in those particular set of parents. You can also, right? You can choose, right? This is going to be who I'm going to stay in. But at the very last minute, you might come out, which might result in some people giving stillbirth because the soul decided at that time, the spirit decided, I don't want to be in this particular body, not this time around. Now, what happens is that the mother and father have their own karmic blueprint, right? So we are born to them. They will nurture us in the way that they were nurtured, right? And alongside any environmental factors, which is all else that they grew upon themselves in terms of conditioning and patterns, and they then pass that down to us at least up until the ages of 21, 22, 28. Our brain is still developing, so we are still able to change. Because of the spiritual awakening, our vibe starts to change. Now, when our vibe changes, that means, hang on, everything that I have known, everything that I have picked up comes from mom, comes from dad, right? And we begin to realize I'm not that, right? And as this realization dawns upon us, it might even come that, wait a minute, these limitations were also passed down to me. Even this is not me. There is a hunger, a thirst for coming into your wholeness without any conditions, without any conditioning, without any patterns. This is an almost desperate desire for anyone on a spiritual growth, anyone on the spiritual awakening path, Kundalini awakening. We all want to get to a point of Shunya, the void, the field of possibilities, a place which has no conditioning. In order for us to get to that, we've got to shed what we've picked up in this lifetime. right? Now, as we are doing that, we will also be shedding everything we've picked previously by way of ancestral healing, which we'll come to in another post. Now, when it comes to mother and father, you will have the mother wound and then the father wound as well. In the age, if you were born quite recently, the issues that you may face will be quite different. Now, if you were somebody who's taken birth at least 18 years ago and longer, say to 45 to 50 years ago, that generation would have faced very similar issues. By that time, we were coming to the end of the age of Pisces. Now, in the age of Pisces, it was an age where women were oppressed. It was an age where people started to engage in, for example, activities that are contracting acts of consciousness. So our consciousness was contracting as opposed to expanding. Now, our mothers would have learned that one can only live as a dependent. But those that we depended on, or those that they depended on, did not treat them well, did not acknowledge their womanhood or their femininity, and that the woman was always going to be serving, subservient, to the point that the woman would turn a blind eye to any misfeasance taking place within the family unit. So if a child was being abused, it would be covered within the family unit. No outsider would know about this. And there are cases and situations where the mother knew that her daughter was being abused, that the daughter was below the age of consent, or even a son, right? When all of this is happening, the mother turns a blind eye. The father turns a blind eye if the mother was so stressed out and she was admonishing the child, not giving enough care, love, and attention. It was the norm at that time for children to be there, but not to be heard. You can see a child but not to hear. A child did not have the voice. Children were done to as opposed to being involved, right? So it was, I'm telling you to sit down, so that means I'm telling you to sit down. You cannot do anything without your mother's approval, without your father's express permission. You want to go out? Let's see the mood that daddy is in when he comes home. So the child's joy and happiness was very dependent on how mama and papa are coping emotionally. And the mother and father were already at emotional dysfunction, meaning whatever dysfunction or the way that they were taught how to regulate their emotions, they have inherited, which they're now passing down to their children. So their children would either become very avoidant, not be in touch with their emotions. And as the Piscean age moved, these dynamics started to change. And so the male or the masculine from that age might have been one that was suppressing the woman, and that the woman needs to be led, right? That the woman needs to be conquered, right? And the woman, that she must be service, she must be subservient, she cannot be heard. Now, as a result, girls would have been taught by their mothers, indirectly or directly, that we must also take the back seat. And fathers who were not there unknowingly passed down abandonment to their sons, who were unable to wake up to their masculinity and provide, right? They were unable to meet any lack that they have. They were unable to rise to their divine masculinity, where there is no up and down. More about this in part 2.